Hi, I'm John Paul and a really warm welcome back to my channel. Today I'm really delighted to be answering another subscriber's question, and this one is around the idea of where we should be or need to be psychologically in order to offer to sit with clients. It's a great question. I sometimes get people say about cutting the training down, for example. Why is it so long? 5 years, for example, in the case of a psychotherapy qualification. There are courses that do something full-time within a year, and I think, of course, you can compress intellectual, theoretical from a 5-year part-time into a year-long course. But the point about a lot of the training, I think, on reflection, that a lot of it is about personal development, it is yourself, the therapist's self as a human being that really is the tool. The relationship is also what's co-created with the client. The relationship is the thing that facilitates and enables the change, hopefully, that the client wants. So I think this is very related to that, this concept of, and what place do we need to be in as therapists in order to make that offer. So the question that somebody's asked is, would you talk about if it makes sense to try to become a therapist if one is not healed herself? That's what the subscriber says. I can do this as a therapist because this helps me as a patient, realistic or delusional? That second part, I think, is saying, is it realistic to think that if I'm going to sit with clients, will that help me as a potential patient or client or human being? Is that realistic or delusional to think that? So I'm going to deal with that, of course, second part too, as part of the question. I'm also, it's a good time to take in a comment that another subscriber made. His name's Lee. He came on and had a chat with me, and I'll put a link to our conversation here. But below another video, I think he made a related point, which is, he said, one minor negative I found is I think people seem to hold very high standards for therapists in terms of their emotional regulation, as if we should be some sort of Zen masters, immune to any form of negative emotion, irrational thinking or harmful behaviours. And he says, I'm certainly not there yet. So I think you can see that that is related to the original subscriber's question. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I just wanted to start by first looking at the term healing, or healed actually, which is the term used by the person who wrote the question. I googled emotional healing, and what it says there is this involves processing and overcoming emotional pain, trauma or distress, and restoring emotional well-being. So the first thing that I would say, these are just all reflections, of course, my own personal reflection. I would love to hear from you with any of your comments about any of this. Please do comment below the video, and also please do give me any other suggestions for videos to record in the future. Just to say quickly as well, if you have found it helpful, please do give it a like, please do share it if you think anybody else will find it helpful, and please do subscribe if you haven't already. Anyway, back to this. So this definition of emotional healing involves processing and overcoming pain and restoring emotional well-being. The things that I would say about that is, firstly, overcoming pain and restoring well-being as if it's something that would be a permanent state for anybody, including a therapist. I think the thing that I would say there is that all human beings, including therapists, all the time are changing. All people change. There's an ebb and flow. People are disconnecting and connecting all the time. So this idea that there's some permanent state of well-being, I suppose you might say that could be consistent with this idea of a Zen master, this permanent state of calmness or regular emotional regulation. I just think it's inevitable that everybody, including therapists, are going to experience a full range of emotions. In Lee's words, he talks about negative emotions and as opposed to therefore positive emotions, but the full range of emotions, I think, are going to be experienced by therapists too. This is all subject to a very significant caveat, which I'm going to come on to, and you might be able to guess what that might be. But therapists that I know would lead not the lives of Zen masters, or the lives I imagine Zen masters would lead, but lives which involve families, potentially jobs, taking care of themselves physically, psychologically, adolescent children, taking care of pets, aging parents. Even if people experience having navigated certain things and relationships and their communication and their boundaries and their self-esteem and their relationship with their bodies, all kinds of things, if people have been able to navigate that, therapists, in a way that gives them more often than not this sense of well-being, then of course other things come along and life changes. Things are changing all the time. Political changes sweep through, or a parent starts to dement, or there's a bereavement, whatever it might be. So I think this idea that there is any permanent state of well-being, I don't think is realistic for human beings. I think it's inevitable that human beings are going to be fluctuating, including therapists, again, subject to the caveat, which I'll come on to. The fact that therapists experience pain or have, and struggles and confusion and a lack of clarity, but also love and joy, I think that is helpful for the relationship. If you're looking at empathy, it can give us a great sense of empathy to have gone through things ourselves, although of course we are not our clients, we're all human. So if we've been through an experience and felt a particular way, it may very well be that the client has felt similarly, and those things are very connecting. You know, we can make connections with clients intellectually, we can do things with humour, and also primarily I think it's often an emotional connection that's going to be made. So if they can see something mirrored back in terms of your felt experience of it, which will sometimes include what Lee calls negative emotions there, I think that is potentially going to be helpful for the relationship. Also, if you are, as a therapist, I think we need to be experiencing a full range of emotions with our clients. I've said in other videos that what often happens during life is that we disconnect our sort of thoughts from our feelings, and they're not in alignment anymore. So an amount of the process that can often happen during therapy is actually reconnecting therapists with their emotional experience and making them in line with thoughts, body, behaviours. So any suggestion that we wouldn't feel certain things could actually be perpetuating a difficulty which a client may have of disconnecting. But the important thing is here, treats them as signals, I think, information, rather than being in them. And that's what I'm going to come on to in a minute, the more general point about the big caveat to all this, if we're going to make the offer to clients. But a felt experience of life, being aware of a felt experience and treating those of value and importance when we're sitting with somebody, I think is a key to establishing and maintaining therapeutic relationships. So a full range of emotions, I think it's inevitable with the kind of lives that we all lead, including therapists, and I think it's very valuable. I don't think necessarily clients would expect or want to come to somebody who wasn't a kind of human being and experiencing their humanity, which includes our felt experience. The next question, which I'm going to reply to, is something that a subscriber talked about, artificial intelligence, and the extent to which I think that will change the industry. And I think it probably will change it, but of course there's a fear that it might replace it. And what I'm going to talk about in that is that I don't think that's ever going to be the case. Might be famous last words, we'll see. But one of the things I talk about there is that, of course, AI, as much as it might sound like it and know the words and use feeling words, it doesn't have a fundamental humanity, care. It can sound like it has empathy, which can be soothing to listen to, which can be comforting for people. So I think it has a role, but it isn't. It doesn't empathise. It doesn't have the same humanity that human beings have. And I'll probably conclude in that, therefore, that if we're going to work so hard to get AI to do it, why not just use human beings? Anyway, that's for the next question. So in this situation, I don't think it's necessarily even a need or want from our clients that they wouldn't have an alive human being who's having an experience in response to what's happening with them too. Again, subject to this caveat that I'm going on to. As much as I think the aliveness is important and is key, and people's therapist humanity is key to the relationship, to establishing, maintaining a therapeutic relationship, I think the difficulty can be is if what you might say negative emotions, I suppose, things like fear, anger, kind of pain, trauma, confusion, lack of clarity are dominant. So I think it's a matter of intensity, duration, frequency, something being an occasional state or sometimes, rather than being a trait of a therapist's personality. Because I think the difficulty is if those sorts of qualities, the more you might say negative emotions, I suppose, dysregulation is a trait, is frequent. If a therapist is gets very aroused in terms of fear, anger, or going under in terms of hopelessness, helplessness, despair, generally in life, those things are going to be problematic, I think. Just looking here, when we offer to see clients, because I guess that's what we're doing. I know it's a bit legal in some ways, but we make an offer, I think. I hadn't really thought about that until I was thinking about this. You know, I think it's interesting to think about what is in our hand. If we metaphorically give our hand to a client and they metaphorically take it as well, what's within our hand as an offer? And I would say within that, it's the boundaries, to honour boundaries, I guess trustworthiness, all the kind of ethics, being ethical. I also think if we're looking at these issues of trauma, early attachment issues, pain, difficulty and distress, I think within that offer is we have worked through enough of that to be able to sit with people and contain their difficulty and distress whenever that comes up, because I don't think the same can be said of the offer that the client makes. Boundaries coming primarily, being as open and honest and bringing as much of themselves from a thought and feeling point of view, I think is the offer I would think that I hope clients make, and then those two meet. But I think our offer is a little bit different. Anything that they want to say, if they do want to react, if that's what they feel like at the time, anything that they think, very important thing that they express that. I do think that's a bit different for the therapist. I think we offer to contain, again, this is just my ideas around it, so please do let me know if you disagree or think something else. But I think our offer is to contain whatever they bring. Now, it's a very important, but a side issue. I might do another video on it at another time. It is therefore, from our point of view as therapists, I think it's important that we choose who we work with, that we know more than likely that we will be able to contain what's happening. That becomes something very much that therapists will do more over time. It's very difficult at the beginning when you're trying to set up a practice to do that. You may not even know who you would work best with. I think an appreciation of that and making choices based on that over time, I do think is quite important, because as I say, I think when we make that offer and somebody comes in, they can say, think, feel, and the idea entirely is to show all of themselves. So I think it's important that we as therapists have taken responsibility for our own if you're looking at regulation, our own nervous system, to be able to hold and contain that. That's not to say there's any perfection. I've said that I think things are fluctuating all the time. They need to with therapists. Therapists need to feel all kinds of feelings as information. But if you're looking at, for example, some of the more negative feelings that you might say, let's look at fear, let's look at anger, and perhaps hopelessness and helplessness, and also looking at, say, narcissistic traits. Let's take them in turn. They're dominant. Say something like fear is dominant with the therapist, with client. It develops, of course, because of attachment and trauma issues, often with people, and it's our natural human state. We're programmed to survive rather than to be happy. We're wired to struggle. But if fear dominates, it can really hinder things, because what comes with fear behaviourally, I suppose language-wise as well, is avoidance. So we may not be honest, we may not challenge, we may struggle to hold boundaries. So that can cause problems, understandably, in relationship. A regulated nervous system is one that is not in fear. So that I think that's why this idea of emotional regulation is key for a lot of things in therapy. Similarly, anger, that we may feel frustrated occasionally, is an important signal as to what's happening. If it's dominant, though, it's not buffered, we're not able to notice it, regulate ourselves and take the message from it. If we react from it, I think the difficulty with that is we can re-traumatize or traumatize somebody as a therapist, and we will also likely, with the response that we get, be re-traumatized back. So the thing about unprocessed trauma is that if it is unprocessed, we listen through our triggers, and perhaps even worse, funny kind of word, worse, but I think you know what I mean, we might react from our triggers as well. And again, I don't think that's within the offer. No perfect world, there's no perfect person, no perfect therapist. Perfection is all in the mind, isn't it? But definitely that our intention has been to work on that we are aware, self-reflective, that we would look at our part in anything, and that we value and are aware of our responsibility, I suppose, to provide that holding and containment, that's part of the offer, I think. Can I just say about healing as well here, this idea of healing, this definition about something being restored or sort of being permanent sense of well-being, I think one of the most helpful ways to look at healing actually from a therapist's point of view is comparing ourselves to what things used to be like. So it's not that it is characterized by a particular feeling state now. I would say a key thing to look at if we're on a way to to healings is that looking at what things were like now compared to what they were like, say, 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago. So I just wanted to say that about this idea about healing and checking on progress, I suppose, during the therapy training and also through working with clients. I think it's very much about comparing ourselves not to others, but comparing ourselves to ourselves, and knowing that that change that's happened is as a result of conscious effort through, say, the training or our own therapy or working with clients and supervision, all those things. So just going back to if certain things dominate, how problematic that can be. Narcissism, if those traits are up high, of course, as I've talked about in my video on narcissism, I'll put a link to those. Some of the qualities of that is we will struggle with empathy. We'll struggle to accept a difficult reality, so somebody else's reality. We might treat people as dangerous or useful. All of those things, as you can see, are obstacles and will cause significant difficulties in relationships. So I think making sure that if there were narcissistic traits, which are often the result of difficult childhood upbringings and a wound, that's also something we're conscious about and working through as well. And I think that, the thing about all this is it's an ongoing process, and it has to be good enough, I would say, to work with clients. And I think it's something that will continue to develop over time with clients and through working with clients. And I will come on to that as well with this issue about helping us through working with clients, whether that's realistic or delusional. And I mentioned hopelessness as well, hopeless and helpless. If people are up here for a while and then switch off, if you're looking at that regulation, to sometimes feel a sense of hopelessness, to sometimes feel despair. It's human, that's life, isn't it? I think if it characterizes our life, I do think something that clients will be looking for and expect or hope for, maybe not even consciously, is hope in terms of what they're bringing. And it may be that during a process, you might as a therapist feel some hopelessness, which could be the clients. It's a part of human relationship, isn't it? But again, we're looking at if that's a trait as part of your personality, if that rather than a state, sometimes, if it's more often than not something you're experiencing, I think that can cause difficulties with clients, because I do think hope is something that we offer. So this idea of processing pain or overcoming pain, to have some pain is life. It's an inevitable part of life. But I think if pain dominates, again, if it's more often than not, if it's sort of structural by the way that a therapist is navigating life or the struggles that they're having in life, I think that is something that could cause difficulty in therapy. I don't think that's necessarily what a client would expect. We've all been clients, so what would you expect? We may not even have thought about that. I don't think I would have thought about what I expect from a therapist. I suppose now when I think about it, I would have thought somebody who was honest, open, that would challenge, so they're paying attention, they're curious, they're not looking away. Equally, they wouldn't jump on something or be very judgmental or critical or try and shame. And if you're looking at regulation, emotional regulation, for me, that's that place of calm and alive. And that's where curiosity sits, I think. That's where neither denying or looking away or willful blindness, but also, that place of paying attention, I think that's where they sit, in that sort of calm and alive place. And I think that's very much a sort of, if you're looking at these kind of emotional regulation terms, neuroscience terms, I think that is what we're talking about. I think that's the place from which that's possible to do. If we sit with clients with a toothache, a physical pain, all we'll be able to think about is our toothache. We'll be full of that. And I don't think the offer is to be full of our own difficulty and pain. So we sometimes experience it is life. But if we are full of it, we won't be able to listen. I do think it's absolutely possible to be having significant difficulties outside of the therapeutic room and probably be of some help within the therapy room, because it's very human to be able to give others what is very difficult to give ourselves. Talking the talk and not walking the walk is a very human thing to do. It's very usual for therapists to say things to others that they would like to hear themselves and they know would be helpful themselves. But I have difficulty in putting that into practice externally, and that may have a value for clients. They're hearing empathy, they're getting validation, they're getting somebody seeing and hearing what's happening for them, and that will undoubtedly have some sort of effect. But of course, what might be missing then, if a therapist hasn't sort of worked through something themselves, is that if you have worked through something, that really also offers something else to the client, doesn't it? Which is an enormous amount of value. Your way of navigating it as a therapist may be different to the client, although that, as I've said before, there are these common things with human beings. Your story is not their story necessarily, but the fact that you have navigated something, so you can answer the questions of how do you manage your own anxiety, how did you improve your relationship with your body, what do you do when you feel annoyed about something, when do you communicate it, when do you not, what happens in relationship, all these types of things which will be being talked about during the training, during supervision, becoming out during therapy. To have worked through them, I think adds something which is very significantly of value to clients too. And as I said, the difficulty, the sort of stick of knot, is that we will always potentially be listening through our own triggers with our own pain, visit difficulty and distress and pain on clients potentially, and it will be visited back potentially on us as well as therapists. So then just finishing off on this, which is that point about I can do this as a therapist because this helps me as a patient. Is that realistic or delusional? So I think what the subscriber is saying is if I go into being a therapist thinking and believing that I do this because this helps me, they say as a patient, perhaps they mean a client, perhaps they just mean a human being. I think that's entirely realistic in my experience to believe that being people's therapists, that it is something that helps me as a human being. It's very much a reason why I love the job that I do and why I enjoy so much working with the amazing clients that I work with. Co-regulating relationships, which when a therapeutic relationship goes well, you will also be being regulated by that. There are times when you might come in from some difficulty and distress outside of the therapy room and go and sit with clients and feel much better as a result of it. So I think it's entirely realistic that probably this process of healing and trust in other human beings gets built or increased over time through sitting with clients. I think the point here, though, is that's absolutely not your client's responsibility to do that, that it is a byproduct, a funny word, but I think you probably know what I mean, as a result of working with people, that it does enhance your trust of yourself and enhance your trust of other human beings. I think that's often a result of working with people in this way, but it's absolutely, I don't believe, and my client's responsibility actually to regulate me. Co-regulating relationships will most often happen, but the person who is most responsible for regulation is in self-regulation, which goes back to this point about emotional regulation, is the therapist. I think that's one of the key parts of our responsibility and our offer, because if we're not doing that, in fact, we'll look to our clients, I think, to regulate us, and we may feel resentful if they don't. And I don't think, again, I mean, there's nothing's perfect. Life is all kinds of different experiences and all kinds of different things, isn't it? But we're talking about intention here and what we would be working towards and where kind of cognitively, rationally, the responsibility sits. And I think if I'm not self-regulating myself enough, I'm not having fulfilling relationships outside and having lots of difficulties, I probably will go into the room and expect or hope my client to do that. And again, I don't think that's part of the offer that they make, and I don't think it's what they would expect or hope either. So lots of things there, lots of reflections. As I said at the beginning, I'd love to hear what you think and feel about all this. Do please comment below. I will try to reply to all comments that I see. Any other ideas about further issues, then just let me know and I'll try and record further videos on them too. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You take care and I'll see you again soon.